Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome back to Cinematic Reviews. As always, I will be your host, Chris, and this is a show about all things movies and TV. Got another fun episode for y'all today. I'm going to be giving my review of Wicked for Good, the sequel to last year's blockbuster film, Wicked. It's based on the Broadway film and beloved book. So I'm super excited to give my take on the blockbuster sequel that has been slowly starting to get a lot of Oscar buzz, just like the first movie did last year, and we'll dive into all that. We'll also cover a bunch of news headlines that have been coming out the last week or so. So a lot to unpack in today's episode. Before we get into all that, a couple of reminders at the top. You can watch the show every week at youtube.com/the cinematic reviews. You can also listen to the audio version on your favorite podcast platform. You can hit subscribe, hit the follow button. It helps the show out a lot. And I appreciate everyone that has supported the show for the last 3 years, especially this year being the first year on YouTube. It's been a blast doing the episode for you all every week. Also, check out the social media pages on Facebook, X, and Instagram. You can just search for Cinematic Reviews and find those pages. I post all the artwork from each episode on there so you can get a better look at those, as well as news that have broken out in Hollywood. I just did one about the Blockbuster deal that is supposedly on the table of Netflix buying out Warner Brothers. The plot thickens with another contender getting thrown into the mix for that bidding war, so we'll get into that momentarily. I also posted about the Marvel Fridays, which has been the Friday event so far, with every Marvel project getting reviewed on the show every week, leading up to the highly anticipated film Avengers Doomsday, which comes out next year in December. So we'll be covering every Marvel project in the MCU every week. I just did the Captain America, the First Avenger episode, so that is up. And then we'll be wrapping up phase one, with episode 6, Marvel's The Avengers, this Friday. So if you're a Marvel fan, now is the time to tune into the show every week and hear what I have to say on each episode. With that, let's head over to the news and reaction segments of today's episode with all those news headlines coming out the last few weeks. To kick off the news headlines for today's episode, we have Star Wars, the original Star Wars movie, returning to theaters on February 19th, 2027 for the 50th anniversary of Star Wars. We have a little bit of ways to go, but they did announce that the 50th anniversary of Star Wars will issue a re-release of the first Star Wars movie. We've been slowly getting every Star Wars movie a re-release every so often as they hit a milestone in its creation or run or whatever you want to call it. So next up, we will have the Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clone Wars, I believe is the only one left after this one to get a re-release in theaters. Let's take a peek at what that anniversary would be. I believe that would be the 20th anniversary. 2020 to 2002. So the 25th anniversary would be the same year. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get a double re-release in 2027 with Attack of the Clones and the original Star Wars film. So that is coming. So mark your calendars for a re-release. We will do a special episode just like we did for Revenge of the Sith when the 20th anniversary happened. So we will do the same for Star Wars. Next up, we have Matt Smith is reportedly the front runner to play Brainiac, who is rumored to be the main villain in the Superman sequel from James Gunn. That title is Man of Tomorrow. So Matt Smith, along with a few other actors, are in the running to play Brainiac, but he seems to be the favorite and the front runner for the Brainiac character. I'm super excited about that. I think Matt Smith is an incredible actor. You probably recognize him from Game of Thrones, from Doctor Who. He was in the most recent Caught Stealing alongside Austin Butler, which we talked about last episode on the show. So Matt Smith is the front runner for Brainiac in James Gunn's DCU. Very excited about that. I think he would do a great job as Brainiac. Avengers Endgame is returning to theaters on September 25th, 2026. This is obviously a final push to get that back into the top spot for the highest grossing film of all time, hoping to dethrone Avatar. So this will also reportedly have an attached teaser leading into Avengers Doomsday. Definitely be checking that out in theaters. Looking at the schedule, I don't think we'll be able to time Endgame out for that re-release in September. We'll try to get it as close to that re-release as possible on Marvel Fridays. I'll have to do some calendar work and update you all for that. But Avengers Endgame is coming back to theaters next year in preparation for Doomsday. Very exciting. Switching back over to the DC Universe, Supergirl trailer is rumored to come out this week. The date that I have found most commonly reported is December 11th, which would be Thursday. We will do a live reaction to that trailer on the show during Marvel Friday, if that is indeed what happens. If it doesn't come out until Saturday, we will do it on the following episode on the Iron Man 3 episode for Marvel Friday. But if it does end up coming out on Thursday, I will do a live reaction of that trailer on the show alongside the Boys Season 5 trailer, which is already out. I have not watched it purposely so I can do it on the show during Marvel Friday. I've been having a lot of fun doing the live reactions to trailers on Marvel Friday, so I've been saving all of those up. But be on the lookout for the Supergirl teaser trailer reportedly coming out this week. I'm very excited about Supergirl. I've been seeing a lot of the promotional posters on that, and I'm very, very excited. I need to jog my memory on Supergirl's name in there, the actress. You probably recognize her from Game of Thrones as well. That is Millie Alcock. So she did appear at the end of James Gunn's Superman as kind of a tie-in to this one. So very excited. That comes out next summer in 2026. So we're looking for the first teaser trailer for Supergirl. And then finally, the last bit of news I wanted to touch on today before we get into our featured film. I teased it already at the top of the episode with another entity coming into that bidding war for the ownership of Warner Brothers and HBO. Paramount has thrown their hat into the ring. Reportedly, they have a bid on the table to buy Warner Brothers for $108 billion, which would outbeat Netflix's original offer. Now, Netflix's offer has been reported two different money lines. The first one I saw was $82 billion. Now it's being reported that it's lower. It's more in the range of $72 billion. So, I mean, give or take $10 billion or so, but definitely Paramount has the upper hand if this is indeed their top offer of $108 billion is what's being reported. Now, it's been kind of wishy-washy on Paramount's involvement. Reportedly, Paramount has been calling Warner Brothers about buying it out, but the shareholders or majority owners or whatever you want to call them of WB has reported that they have not had conversations with Paramount at all, that they're still in contact with Netflix. So this thing is just kind of a mess right now with Paramount jumping in the middle of it. I have a hard time thinking that either one of these will get approved or finalized because this would affect the entertainment business forever. Like this, it would probably be in a better situation if Paramount ended up buying it rather than Netflix buying it out. Now, Netflix also came out and said that before the whole WB HBO thing came out, they were actually looking at potentially buying Disney, which is not too surprising considering that Disney has been losing money the last few years, and they're probably looking at a new investor or new owner just to kind of steer the ship. But if Paramount ends up getting their hands on WB, I don't think it would be as end of the world as it would be with Netflix. Having a streaming service as powerful as Netflix, owning a massive company like Warner Brothers and HBO is probably going to be really damning to the entertainment market, and that'll just fire up the FCC about monopolizing and all that stuff. Now, the same argument can be made for Paramount. They're on a mission to potentially be doing the same thing, but it's more or less a studio buying a studio out versus this global streaming service that is Netflix. It's kind of similar to like back when rumors were going around that Apple was going to buy out Disney. That would have been a massive, massive merger or deal if that would have gone through. And I think the same would be the case if Netflix ended up getting Warner Brothers. But with a $20 billion difference between Paramount and Netflix reportedly, that's kind of tough to kind of turn your eye away from. So we'll keep monitoring this bidding war against Paramount and supposedly Netflix. If it is indeed a bidding war, this could get rather interesting. If it's more just blowing smoke and trying to prevent Netflix from getting this deal finalized, we'll find out, I guess, in the end once we get some more facts around this whole bidding war. But the plot thickens with the ownership of WB and HBO. It's really fascinating, but it's also scary at the same time on, the monopolizing figure of it and how it will either positively or negatively, most likely negatively, affect the entire entertainment business. It's scary, but it's also kind of exciting to see the potential that could happen if a company like Paramount did end up buying out Warner Brothers. So we'll keep monitoring that, of course, because that is a huge, huge headline ending the year of 2025. So that wraps up today's news and reactions. Let's head over to our feature film of the day, Wicked for Good.
Haven't you heard? I'm the Wicked Witch of the West.
No good deeds, thousand I couldn't be happier.
Somehow I've fallen under your spell.
Seems like life forever.
You're the only friend I ever had.
And I've had so many friends. But only one that mattered. I've heard it said that people come into our lives for a reason.
They need someone to be wicked.
Like a comet pulled from orbit as it passes the sun.
So that you can be good.
Like a seed dropped by a skybird in a distant world. Who can say if I've been changed for the better? Because I knew you. Because I knew you. I have been changed for good. Think of what we could do together. There's no place like home.
So like I said at the top of the episode, Wicked for Good is the sequel to last year's blockbuster film Wicked, based on the beloved book and Broadway musical. Now, before Wicked came out, I've only known the story of Wizard of Oz. I never saw the Broadway show for Wicked. Never read the book. I knew the general synopsis of Wicked, more focusing on the Wicked Witch and her relationship with Glinda, the Good Witch, how it kind of alters the story that ends up unfolding once Dorothy arrives to Oz, and kind of really just diving into Elphaba, or the Wicked Witch's side of this, and this one of the most famous stories around, where Dorothy ends up coming to Oz and meeting the wizard and making new friends. So of course I would be fascinated with this. I grew up with the Wizard of Oz. There's a joke that goes around in my family when I was a kid, probably when I was like 4 or 5 years old. My grandpa would always tease me a little bit because I didn't quite say the title of the movie right. I'd always calls it Wizard of Oz instead of saying the full title, The Wizard of Oz. So it was kind of a running joke in my family. But I grew up watching The Wizard of Oz like once a year, even twice a year around Thanksgiving time. Been kind of lacking. I think it's been probably a good 10 years since I've seen Wizard of Oz. I definitely want to do a review episode of Wizard of Oz on the podcast. Maybe we can squeeze that in next year. Otherwise, down the road, we can probably make an episode for that one. Still need to do an episode on Wicked. Never did get around to doing that last year. So maybe we can do a Wicked season on the show where we revisit Wicked for Good. We'll review Wicked finally, and then maybe we can start it off with Wizard of Oz. So a lot of potential there. But getting back to the sequel here, this came out on November 21st, 2025. It is currently in theaters. So right now it is looking at about $442 million worldwide in the box office. It had roughly $150 million budget. Now, granted, you got to kind of take into account the marketing there. So you're probably looking, I usually like to double the budget when it comes to like the marketing. So you're probably looking at more like the $250 to $300 million range. So with it already hitting 442 million, with only being out a couple of weeks, everything else should be a profit. Now, this will probably be in theaters through the Christmas season, New Year's season. We probably won't get this on, since this is Universal, it'll probably land on Peacock sometime next spring, maybe, early February, middle of February, maybe. Seems like Peacock has been a little bit slower in getting their movies and out onto that platform. It'll most likely hit like the Apple Store, the Fandango at Home, the Amazon Store. That one you're probably looking at maybe New Year's, middle of January. So I'd say about a month and a half after that, it's probably when it'll hit Peacock. So, but it's looking pretty strong. A lot of great reviews on it so far. It's getting a lot of Oscar buzz, and we'll dive into that in a little bit here. But before that, let's head into the cast of Wicked for Good. Now, most of the cast members, they are in this movie as well because from what I understand, they did it how a lot of these two-part stories go. They film these all together. So the cast is pretty much the same. There's a couple of new characters in here, like Dorothy being introduced, and some of the characters being changed from this character to a more iconic character like Scarecrow and Tin Man, who we'll have a lot to say on those for sure. But kicking things off, we have to give it to the star of the show, which is Cynthia Erivo, who plays Elphaba, or aka the Wicked Witch, in the Wizard of Oz story. Same thing here. She's fantastic as Elphaba. I loved her in the first movie. She brings that same momentum and the same incredible performance into this sequel. This is really all I know her from. She's been in a few things over the years, but nothing really I recognize her from. So this is really all I know her from a career standpoint. And this is going to catapult her into the stratosphere as Elphaba, the Wicked Witch in Wicked. So, like, she could pretty much pick which project she wants after this. And she is a phenomenal actor. I know she's been getting a lot of criticism about, when the first Wicked movie came out, she didn't like the iconic poster that came out afterwards. You probably know the headline that came through with that, where the iconic like Broadway and the book poster is where Elphaba is on the cover with Glinda. Glinda is like whispering into her ear. The hat is covering her eyes. Apparently, Cynthia did not care for the reimagining of that with her and Ariana Grande, which was made by I think the studio ended up backing that one, and she was on the more against it, and she got a lot of backlash for that. Now, aside from, I try not to let the outside social media stuff affect my review of the movie that we're watching. But I needed to at least mention that to kind of give you some context on what Cynthia has been kind of dealing with throughout this entire process. But looking at her performance in the movie itself, I think she was fantastic. I love the costume design. The green really pops on the screen. It's going to sound kind of weird, but it sounds natural in a way, the way that they were able to turn her into the Wicked Witch. Um, but yeah, she's fantastic in here. I absolutely love her as Elphaba. She did a fantastic job with the singing, with the acting, the stunts that she has to perform on the broomstick, and the settings is fantastic in this movie. I love the set pieces. It really reminds me of my childhood when I was watch Wizard of Oz every year. It was just really, really awesome. Ariana Grande plays Glinda once again. She gets quite a bit more to do in here, in versus the first one. It was more or less the Elphaba story in the first movie. Now we kind of get more of Glinda in here and what she's been dealing with post Elphaba turning into this Wicked Witch, this figure that the Wizard of Oz and Madame Morble kind of created in order to control Oz the way they want to. And we'll get into those two characters here shortly. But focusing on Ariana Grande, obviously the famous singer-songwriter, now turned actress. I've known her most of my childhood. You know, she's about the same age as me. I think she's about a year older than me. But, you know, I remember her as Kat on Victorious, and then she eventually did Kat and Sam with Melissa McCarthy. But she's a phenomenal singer, phenomenal actress. She's been in quite a bit of stuff lately as an actress, so she's really kind of converted over into the Hollywood sphere, as well as, you know, still being that singer-songwriter that she is most known for. But she's fantastic in here. I love her as Glinda. The enthusiasm, the self-centeredness, and just kind of, you can tell that she really, really cares about Elphaba, but she puts on this persona to, I guess, protect herself in a way, you know, because she kind of had her own things, her own demons that she deals with, along with Elphaba. But you can tell at the end of the day, these two are best friends, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to watch out for one another. And it really shows at how the end of the movie happens, where Glinda is more or less protecting her image, but also paying respect to her best friend. And we get that scene at the end where it kind of changes the Wizard of Oz story that we all know, where the Wicked Witch ends up getting killed by Dorothy. But it turns out in this version of the story, in the Wicked version, she ended up faking her death so that she could run away with Ferrero, who ends up being her love interest once again in this one. And it really changes the ending, but it does it in I think a really good way, to where it's kind of an ending that you were hoping for, because she was a misguided character that just kind of got pulled into this scheme by Oz and Madame Morble, and it really turns the table on Oz. Whereas growing up with the Wizard of Oz movie, the Wicked Witch was evil, Oz was the good person. Granted, he wasn't a wizard, but he made inventions and stuff to improve Oz. Whereas here in the Wicked story, he's inventing things in order for him to control it and rule Oz with an iron fist, where it's very the opposite in the Wizard of Oz. So I know there's been a few reviews out there that I've seen that are really stuck on the story that we all grew up with Wizard of Oz. But the point of Wicked is to kind of change that perspective and give a new take on this story that everybody loves. It's kind of take it for what it is thing, you know. If you like the Wicked story, good. But you can also like the Wizard of Oz. Like, it's just somebody's take of the story. And I like both. Like, this nowhere near ruins Wizard of Oz for me. I know a lot of people have said that as a negative, is that now Wicked is trying to replace Wizard of Oz, or trying to ruin that story. It doesn't for me. I keep them separated. This is just a take that somebody had on this story that we all grew up with. I still, you know, put Wizard of Oz in its own little bubble, and this is kind of like an alternate universe type of thing, kind of, pulling something out of Marvel. This is like an alternate version of it, and you just kind of take it for what it is. So I wanted to just kind of squash that right now, because that is not how I see this. Now, a lot of people have a really hard time, whether it's like a really beloved movie and they just can't see any other way. Like, Wicked's been out for a long time. Like, the Broadway musical has been out for a while. The book's been out forever. But for me personally, I only knew the Wizard of Oz story. So that was what I knew. That was the only version that I knew. So when I saw Wicked and then now seeing the sequel, it really is like opened my eyes, like, oh, well, they kind of changed that. They twisted the ending there, but I wasn't mad about it. I thought they did a really good job on executing that, because that's just how my brain works. I'm able to disconnect my, my childhood or personal feelings or whatever you want to call it. I'm able to disconnect it in my reviews, and for what it is, Wicked for Good is a really good sequel, and it's just a really good movie in general. And it all comes on the shoulders of Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande as the two main characters. And I like how they kept the focus on these two, even with the introduction of Dorothy and her friends Scarecrow and the Lion and the Tin Man. They did a really good job at still focusing on these two, because this is their story. This is not Dorothy's story. If you want Dorothy's story, go watch Wizard of Oz, because that is her story. This is Elphaba's story. This is Glinda's story. This is Thiaz's story. This is Ferrero's story, who ends up becoming Scarecrow. This is Bach's story, which he ends up becoming the Tin Man in a very gruesome and dark way. And we'll get to him here shortly as well. But if I could take anything away from this, I'm really impressed with how they were able to keep the focus on Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo, where they could have easily just copped out and shown Dorothy's face and really put her at the front of the movie, and that would have been okay. But I think the way that they went about it this way, I think, is perfect. It kept the focus on what the story is, and the story is about the friendship between Glinda and Elphaba, instead of tossing in Dorothy and just kind of muddling up the story and overshadowing the two main characters. So bravo on the director and the writers, and finding a very good way to pay respect to the Dorothy character from a beloved movie, but also keeping that main focus on the story that they're trying to tell, and not getting off track or derailed. So very good job on them. Looking at the antagonists, the villains of the story, if you want to put a label on it, we have the Wonderful Wizard of Oz, who again is played by Jeff Goldblum, who doesn't need any introduction. He's a cherished icon of the Hollywood sphere. He's been in multiple big blockbusters: Jurassic Park, Independence Day. Let me pull up his IMDb here, just because I haven't really looked at it recently. So we have Wicked, which is, you can just add that to the franchise category. He pops up in Marvel, Jurassic Park, I always said, so he was in a couple of those movies. He was in Independence Day, like I said, and just a bunch of other hodgepodge. He did Grand Budapest Hotel, which is great. He shows up in Glee, so he's kind of really stretched his wings a bit. He was on Law and Order, which I think was, other than Jurassic Park, is where I really knew him from. He showed up on Friends, Cats and Dogs. If you remember that movie, I grew up on that movie a lot, as the dad in there, the professor testing on the dog allergies. But he's been in all sorts of stuff. Powder, if you ever seen that movie, I really should do a Powder episode. That movie is fascinating. If you ever seen that one, definitely check that one out. Powder. That is a deep cut for sure. So yeah, Jeff Goldblum is just, he's a national icon, global icon, I should say, and he's fantastic as the Oz. He brings in that Goldblum charm and whimsical nature, but he can also be kind of evil, so to speak, in the way that he needs to be as the quote-unquote villain or antagonist of the story. The real villain of the story is probably Michelle Yeoh's character, Madame Morble, who actually has magic. She's one of the few people in here that actually has magic, whereas Jeff Goldblum doesn't. He's just an inventor, a circus guy who is good at illusions and trickery. But Michelle Yeoh, she's become a national icon as well, in all sorts of different movies. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Everything Everywhere All at Once is where she really blew up, especially in the Oscar sphere. Kung Fu Panda, of course, Wicked, in both that one. She shows up. She comes a part of the Transformers franchise. Like, she has made a huge name for herself, and I think Everything Everywhere All at Once really skyrocketed her as when she won that Oscar for it. And then now with Wicked, it's just going to catapult her even more. So, but she was a really good addition to the story as Madame Morble, who is the kind of the teacher at the school that Elphaba and Glinda go before they start shifting into their prominent roles in the story. She ends up being revealed as kind of the villain at the end of the first movie, and how she is scheming to control Oz and make it the way that she wants to. And she's helping the Wonderful Wizard of Oz, Jeff Goldblum's character, in shaping Oz the way they want to with her magic. So, which fantastic performance by her for sure. Jonathan Bailey, who has been mentioned already on the podcast in Jurassic World Rebirth, who I thought he was fantastic in that movie. He returns as Ferrero, a.k.a. Scarecrow. Jonathan Bailey is incredible. He's an actor that has slowly become one of my favorites in recent years. I really liked him in Jurassic World Rebirth. I hope he returns to that franchise as Dr. Loomis. And he did a fantastic job in The Wicked, both the first one and the second one, as Ferrero. He, of course, like I've mentioned already, ends up getting turned into the Scarecrow, and it was teased in the trailers that he was the Scarecrow in the story. And the way they did about it was very gruesome and very violent, but I think they did a really good job. And and I like the design of him. I thought it was a really cool design that they did for him. But he's fantastic. I really love him. He starts off with Glinda, but you can tell in the back of his mind that he actually is in love with Elphaba, which he ends up being with at the end of the story once they fake her death and they can run away together. He is forever the Scarecrow, though. So that's a story. If you would have told me that in an altered universe that the Scarecrow would end up being in a relationship with the Wicked Witch, I would have told you were crazy. But that's the beauty of the Wicked story, is that it really twists and has a creative take on the iconic Wizard of Oz story. But I honestly didn't see that coming. I didn't know about the book or the Broadway, so I had no idea that he was going to turn into the Scarecrow and that he would end up falling for the Wicked Witch. So that was a big surprise to me, but a good surprise though. They did a really good job at executing it, and Jonathan Bailey was fantastic as Ferrero, aka the Scarecrow. So bravo to him. We also get another iconic character returning, and that is Bach, who ends up turning into the Tin Man, played by Ethan Slater, who I only know from Wicked. Looks like he was in Gen V, but I haven't finished that show yet. So I really only know him from the Wicked show, the Wicked Part 1 and Part 2. But he's fantastic. You know, he, of course, is in love with Glinda, but he ends up getting kind of trapped in this relationship / friendship with Elphaba's sister, Nessa, who we'll talk about here shortly. And then out of her rage, ends up turning Bach into the Tin Man. And he looked very cool. I like the design of the Tin Man. I thought it was a pretty violent and dark way that he turned, but they did it really good too, where you don't really see it. You see the beginning stages of it, but then everything is behind the door, so all you do is hear the screaming and stuff. But I really like the design of the Tin Man in here. Wasn't a huge fan of the Bach character because he is a munchkin that ends up turning into the Tin Man. I would have never guessed that either. But I really did like the design of it. And he ends up being a very angry Tin Man. Like, he's the one that leads the mob against the Wicked Witch, which I guess makes sense because he doesn't have a heart. So But, you know, like I said, growing up with the Tin Man, he was kind of a more gentle soul, kind of lost soul without a heart. Here, he's very angry, and for right reasons, because some chick that is in love with him, but he's not in love with her, turns him into this freaking metal thing without a heart. So it, I totally understand the rage, and I thought it added a really unique and entertaining feature to the story of having an angry Tin Man. But he was really, really good. The rest of the list here to wrap things up, we'll do Nessa, who I said already was the sister to Elphaba. She's played by Marissa Baudet. She is the one that's in the wheelchair because of an accident with her birth. Turns out that she has some magic features to her as well. As we see here, she's able to cast spells out of the Grimir, which is the spell book that Elphaba uses to cast her spells. She ends up using the Grimir to turn Bach into the Tin Man. But she's a very angry and lost person. I know she's getting a lot of hate too in a bunch of reviews, but that's just how the story goes. Where she, you know, falls in love with this Munchkin. The Munchkin kind of lies to her, you know, kind of fakes this relationship, but he's secretly in love with Glinda. Like, be upfront with her from the beginning. Don't drag her along. I think she's a very misunderstood and misguided character, but Marissa Baudet did a fantastic job with the performance. I thought she was great. But yeah, she ends up going evil mode and turning Bach into the Tin Man, which is pretty creepy. She ends up dying. And I'm glad they kept that part in there where we have Dorothy's house crashing on her. So she's the one in the Wizard of Oz movie that gets the house dumped on her, and then Dorothy ends up getting the slippers. And I like the fact that they made them silver, because that's actually what the color are. The movie Wizard of Oz, if I remember my history right, they purposely changed that to the ruby slippers to kind of brighten them up. But in the real story of Dorothy and Oz is they're more silver. So I'm glad that they kept that little aspect in there. It's not a huge big deal if they would have kept it the ruby red slippers, but I'm glad that they kept kind of stuck to the original material and made them the silver one. When Nessa casts the spells, you do see it turn into the kind of the ruby red, which is kind of a callback to the original story, Wizard of Oz. So I thought that was a nice little touch there. But I'm glad that they kept it with the silver shoes, because that's really what they are. The ruby red was just something that movie was added in for entertainment purposes. And then speaking of that, Dorothy, played by Bethany Weaver, who did a fantastic job as Dorothy. I know we only see the back of her head, really. But she did a phenomenal job. And like I said before, I'm glad that they went that route instead of overshadowing Elphaba and Glinda. I think that would have really messed up the story and would have made it not as great, because then it just turns into the Wizard of Oz. This is Elphaba's story. This is Glinda's story. But Dorothy is a part of it, and I'm really impressed with how they were able to find that common ground where when she shows up and she looked like, the costume design was perfect. Her mannerisms, the way she walked, the way she acted, it was phenomenal performance by Bethany Weaver. I absolutely love her performance, and I wouldn't mind if she came back in like a remake of Wizard of Oz, and she was Dorothy again, like in full character instead of just kind of being in the background. But her performance was very Judy Garland-esque, and during the research, I think that's what she was going for, was to pay homage to Judy's version of Dorothy, but also kind of putting her own spin on it. But she looked fantastic. She did a great performance. I love the fact that when they throw the water on Elphaba, it's through the eyes of Glinda, because remember, this is Glinda's story. Now, they could have easily copped out, and I would have been fine with it if we would have seen it play out with Bethany Weaver showing her face and throwing the water in and watching Elphaba scream. But watching that scene through Glinda's eyes was more powerful, I think, because it's and she didn't know the plan. Like, she had no idea Elphaba at the time was going to fake her death. So this is Glinda watching her best friend get melted by this little girl that she just met, a few days ago. And so I thought that was a really great choice as well of watching that iconic scene where Dorothy throws the water on the witch and melts her through the eyes of Glinda. I thought that was a fantastic way, and Ariana Grande did a fantastic performance. She's hiding in the closet, she's crying, she's freaking out, and watching her best friend get melted by this girl over a stupid scheme that uh, didn't need to happen because of the chaos that unfolds because of Oz and Madame Warble's decision to overtake Oz. And it's just a lot of emotion going through that scene as Glinda watches her best friend get melted. But fantastic job by Bethany Weaver. She was great as Dorothy, and I would be totally fine if they do kind of like a remake of The Wizard of Oz and have Bethany Weaver as Dorothy. I think that would be fantastic. So that kind of wraps up the cast there. Briefly touching on the director, John M. Chu, who has done a few things. I haven't really been familiar with him. He directed the first Wicked. He was involved with In the Heights. He was involved with Crazy Rich Asians. And that's about it that I know of that I recognize from his filmography. But he did a fantastic job with both the first installment and the sequel. So bravo to him for doing a fantastic job there. So as a final chapter conclusion wise to the first movie, Wicked, which I absolutely love. It was one of my favorite movies last year. It was phenomenal. And now this being a conclusion to that story, I think they did a great job. So I'm gonna, on a scale of yay to nay, I'm gonna give it a yay. 2 thumbs up for concluding this story in a very beautiful and entertaining way. I was very, very impressed by how they kind of wrap things up, but they also tie in Dorothy and kind of change the ending a little bit to give Elphaba the ending that she actually did deserve. And for those that are kind of pissed off about how that ends, Elphaba deserved it. She was a pawn in this very wicked, pun intended, scheme by Oz and Madame Marble, to where she's just doing what she thought was the right thing. She pushed back against the wizard because he wasn't a wizard, and she was ready to sacrifice everything for the truth to come out. And she was the unfortunate collateral damage in this, and she had to fake her death in order to live her life that she deserves with Ferrero. So I thought it was a really, really well done conclusion in this 2-part story of Elphaba and Glinda. So bravo to them. And I've already kind of touched on it a little bit, but just kind of run through, the changes or kind of links to the original Wizard of Oz movie back in, what was it, like 1940, 1939, something like that. So of course you get the house falling on Nessa, or the Wicked Witch of the East. You get Dorothy with the shoes from the sister. Dorothy visits the wizard, tells him, hey, bring me the broom of the Wicked Witch of the West, and I will grant you what you want. Now, this is kind of the behind the scenes of that story, where he wants the broom in order to depower Elphaba and kill her. So he announces the weakness of her is water. So that's when we get the bucket, which is that scene in the castle at the end, like I said already, through Glinda's eyes, was almost pretty shot for shot the first movie with Judy Garland in it, and very, very well done. I mean, you get the flying monkeys in there, you get the Munchkins in Munchkin Land, you get Glinda in her her little bubble, which is cool because in the original Wizard of Oz movie, it's obviously magic. Now in here, this story, she doesn't have magic, so it's a mechanism that the Wizard of Oz made for her. So that's a kind of a big change there, where Glinda actually doesn't really have magic, so to speak, but she kind of shows towards the end of the movie, maybe it's a possibility that she does have a little magic in her. But that was an interesting change too, where for most of the story, she doesn't have actual magic, whereas in the Wizard of Oz, she has magic that whole time because she's the good witch of the north. Some other of the links, of course, you get the Cowardly Lion, who pops up a little bit. He doesn't pop up as much. And then we get the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, of course. I would have liked to see a little bit more of how Ferrero meets Dorothy. I guess it's kind of insinuated that they probably met each other in a similar way as the original Wizard of Oz movie, where he's stuck on the post. Dorothy helps him out, and then they eventually find Bach in the woods, maybe, and they do the oil thing and wake him up. They find the lion scared in the forest. So I think it's insinuated that if you've seen the Wizard of Oz movie, you can kind of fill in the pieces on how Ferrero and Bach ended up teaming up with Dorothy and ended up being the wizard. My favorite shot of the movie is probably that scene where it's Dorothy, Tin Man, Scarecrow, and the lion in front of Oz. I think that was my favorite shot of the movie. Very beautifully well done with the colors, and just a really blast from the past for me from the original movie when Dorothy and the gang meet Oz for the first time. So those are kind of the changes and links to kind of compare the two on what was different from the original movie to now the Wicked version. So, and then now the Oscar buzz. I wanted to bring this up because same as last year, that first Wicked movie had a lot of buzz around it for the Oscars. It looks like for this year, this movie is competing in 15 to 16 Oscar categories. I'm sure Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress is for sure going to be one of them for Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo. Will it be in contention for Best Film of the Year? I would imagine so, with it being one of the biggest movies of the year, but I guess time will tell if it ends up getting a nomination for it. Best Director, again, we'll kind of monitor that for John M. Chu. I already mentioned the actress, supporting actress. I think that's pretty much given. Supporting actor for Jonathan Bailey. I mean, that would be an interesting take. I guess I'd have to see who else is up for it to see if he had a chance. But I mean, you can also throw in Jeff Goldblum. But I think Jonathan Bailey would be deserving of a nomination for sure. It's probably going to get like a nomination for adapted screenplay, for best casting, probably best cinematography, yeah, best costume design. I think that's a given, and I would probably even today I would even vote for it to win that one because the costume design is incredible. Film editing is another one they have on this list. Yeah, I could see it maybe getting a nomination there. Makeup and hairstyling, I think that's a given with the costume design. I think I would even vote for that one for sure. Looks like the very, very early predictions for nominations for the makeup and hair design would be Frankenstein, Wicked, and Sinners, which is pretty much a given. But I think out of that list of three, I would definitely give it for Wicked. Where's the costume design? Frankenstein again, which totally understandable. And then Hamnet, which I haven't seen that one yet. But again, I'd probably give it to Wicked. Now, this is very, very early predicting of the Oscars, but that would be my first. Best score, probably going to get a nomination. I'd probably even have it win. I know Sinners is up there for me too, so that'd be tough for me because I really like the music and score in Sinners, but I would be fine with having Wicked overtake that one if it ended up doing it. Best song, probably going to get nominated for that. Looks like they gave us two options here: The Girl in the Bubble or No Place Like Home. I would probably venture that No Place Like Home would probably get the nomination for Best Song over The Girl in the Bubble, but Girl in the Bubble is really good too. Best Sound, I don't think that one's going to win. It might get a nomination, but I don't think it's going to win Best Sound. I think that is Sinners or F1 to lose. It looks like they got one battle after another too, which I still need to watch. That is on my list to watch, the new Leo movie. I wonder how much Oscar buzz that one is getting. Visual effects, maybe it gets nominated, but I don't think it's going to win because we have Avatar coming out next week, F1, Superman. I mean, those are some really good visual effects. I would probably venture that Avatar is probably going to win that one, even though I haven't seen it yet and it has not even come out yet. But that's that's just me definitely predicting that one. And I'm sure Avatar is going to get put into, best director, best picture, stuff like that. So that looks like the early buzz meter right now. Very, very early Oscar buzz. But I would venture to say that costume design, hair design, potentially best picture and director, and I'd say for sure best actress and supporting actress would be ones that Wicked gets nominated for and potentially winning. So very, very exciting Oscar potential for sure. Let's head into iconic scenes, favorite quotes, and fun facts before we head into the rankings today. So iconic scenes, like I always do, I pick 5 scenes out that I think when you hear the title of the movie, probably the first scenes that come to mind. So the first one I have on the list is Elphaba attacks Emerald City Guards. This is where they're building the Yellow Brick Road, which is, again, brought back a lot of my childhood, watching them actually build the Yellow Brick Road for the first time. But it's really cool. The action's cool. The set piece is really good with Oz in the background. You have them building this Yellow Brick Road to connect everybody to Oz, and Elphaba does a fantastic job with not killing the guards, which I think was a smart choice. Really stamping that image that she is not the bad guy. She's just trying to clear her name and protect Oz from an evil plot. So I thought that was a really, really fun scene and really action-filled scene. Really, really a lot of cool broom work in here too. Very cool how they had her maneuver on the broom throughout this movie. The next scene I have is the Wizard and Glinda make a deal with Elphaba. This is a very important scene here where they try to compromise, but then Elphaba can't see past the evilness that is Oz, and she ends up breaking this deal, and Glinda is trying to convince her that, hey, this is for the best. It's not so bad. But then Elphaba, stuck in her ways and just planting her feet down, pushes up against Oz because he just can't. Oh, the wizard can't be on his side because he sees who he truly is. That's a really cool scene as well. Glinda and Elphaba fight in Munchkinland. This is probably my favorite one. I love Ariana Grande attempting to fight Elphaba, and I mean she holds her own pretty well. But this is a really fun comedic scene that the entire audience enjoyed, and the showing that I watched it in, everybody was laughing during this part. Probably my favorite scene for sure, when they're fighting each other in Munchkinland. Hand-to-hand combat, too. The next one I have is Glinda watches Dorothy melt Elphaba. I've talked about this one already, how I think it was an incredible way to present that iconic scene. And if the Munchkinland fight didn't happen, I think this scene would be my favorite, where we watch Dorothy melt Elphaba through the eyes of Glinda in that closet. Very emotional and very powerful scene. But it comes in close second for my favorite scene. And then the last one I have on the list is the Wizard finding out the truth about Elphaba, which I haven't talked about yet because I wanted to save it for this part here. So the big kind of reveal at the end, which honestly I kind of saw coming with the way they set up Elphaba not having a father. So it turns out the Wizard is Elphaba's father. When he came into Oz, he ended up meeting her mother, having, sex with her, and then eventually giving birth to a child. When he finds out that Elphaba has been killed, that's when Glinda reveals that, hey, she's your daughter, or she was your daughter, and that pretty much crushes him. And Glinda forces the Wizard to leave Oz after that. So that was a big reveal at the end, where the Wizard ended up being the father of Elphaba, which is crazy. So that is iconic scenes. Those are only the 5 of them, but feel free to reach out on the episode below in the comments if you think of an iconic scene that you think should have been on the list. Favorite quotes. This was a little tougher. I only came up with 5. Most of them are from Elphaba because she's the star of the show. She's got a lot of great dialogue in here. So these first 3 are all from Elphaba. They need someone to be wicked so that you can be good. This is at the end here where Elphaba basically tells Glinda that she is willing to die in order to protect Glinda's image. That was a very powerful way there. And I broke this one down because I just got flashbacks from Wizard of Oz when she said this. She goes, "Monkeys, find that Dorothy." I love it when they said Dorothy in here. It just brought back a rush of my childhood. And then this last one from Elphaba, the Wizard of Oz. No one believed in you more than I did. Just as that moment when she tries to make a deal with, or they try to make a deal with her, but she just can't see past the evil. And it's true. She believed in the Oz the most. She's the one that got super excited about meeting the wizard for the first time, going to Oz with Glinda in that first movie. And then to find out that it's all a lie and all a sham just crushed her. And this line here, very, very powerful on just, this is like the poster child for don't meet your role models. You know, everyone's like, oh, I wish I meet that celebrity. I wish I meet that celebrity. And a lot of times, sure. You know, I met a few actors in my day. I met William Shatner, met Dave Bautista. Very lovely men. They were awesome. They were great to talk with. But then, on a lot of cases, you meet your heroes, you meet your celebrity idols, and they end up being jackasses. And this is kind of the poster child of that, where Elphaba was the biggest fan of the wizard. She believed in him. She wanted to join his cause. She gets to Oz and realizes that this dude's a piece of shit. You know, he's a giant douchebag who just wants to control the people of Oz and get rid of the talking animals. So it's, don't meet your heroes, people. That's the sum of this movie. This one from the Wonderful Wizard of Oz, Mr. Jeff Goldblum. Bring me the broom of the Wicked Witch of the West, so I have proof that she's dead. I included this one because, again, gave me flashbacks from the original Wizard of Oz movie. I love it. And then this one from Glinda. I swear it never ends with that girl talking about Dorothy. Again, I brought that up because of the flashbacks from Wizard of Oz. I just love it when Dorothy comes on, because it's like, okay, this is Wizard of Oz, but it's also Wicked at the same time. They did a really good job at blending the two. Then to end things up before we jump into the ranking segment today, we have the fun facts. Found some interesting ones here. Wicked, the first one was first announced. It would be split into two films back in April 2022, with composer Steven Schwartz explaining, the truth is, we tried for some time to make it into one movie, which required us to cut or omit things we wanted to include that we believe fans of the show and story will appreciate. He added, we found it very difficult to get past Defying Gravity without a break. That song is written specifically to bring a curtain down, and any scene that follows it without a break just seems hugely anticlimactic. I agree with him. When the first movie ends with Defying Gravity, it's like, that is the perfect, like, close the curtains, intermission, let's get to part two. Like, that song was made to end a part of a story. And like he says, it was made to close the curtain. And I thought that was an excellent job and great decision to split this into two movies. Now, the title, Wicked for Good, I wasn't on board with it at first, but as I watched this movie and start to understand the story that they were telling, it fits. Wicked for Good fits. It's great. Next one I have is Glinda's purplish blue dress, which she first wears, and thank goodness, is a homage to both Billy Burke's pink Glinda gown from The Wizard of Oz and the blue dress worn by Glinda in the stage version of Wicked. So that's a interesting fun fact there, where they kind of fuse the two dresses from the two different versions. Unlike the stage musical, Glinda is part of Wonderful. So that is interesting. She was not a part of that original song, I guess, in the stage musical. I really need to see that Broadway version. I hope I get to New York and that one's playing, because I definitely would buy a ticket for the Broadway version of Wicked. In No Good Deed, Elphaba has a flashback to her time at Shiz, which is the school that she goes to in the first part of the story, specifically saying Ferrero. This doesn't occur in the stage show, so there's another change there for you from movie and the musical. We do not see Dorothy's face at all during the film. Director John M. Chu was said to have believed that nobody can replace Judy Garland as Dorothy, and that Wicked is Elphaba and Glinda's story, which I 100% agree. Judy Garland is the Dorothy, and I love the decision to hide Bethany Weaver's face, which I'm sure it would have been fine either way because she did a fantastic job. But I liked the decision to include Dorothy because she is part of the story, but not let her overshadow Elphaba and Glinda because this is their story. So I thought it was a fantastic choice to kind of hide her face and not have her in too many scenes. And if she was in the scene, it was only for a few seconds so that we can focus on the main characters of the story. In the original musical, Nessa was given the ability to walk without her wheelchair when Elphaba enchanted the silver shoes. While the shoes are enchanted in the film adaptation, it was changed to Nessa floating in the air rather than walking to accommodate Marissa Bodet's walking disability in real life. She is in a wheelchair in real life, so they kind of changed that a little bit, which I'm totally fine with. And then the last fun fact I have, the final scene is an homage to the famous Broadway poster for Wicked with Glinda whispering into Elphaba's ear. This is the poster that I talked about already. At the very end of the movie, you get them all in this kind of field, just kind of having a little picnic. Her, Glinda, Ferrero, and I think Bach is there. I don't remember for sure. But we have the iconic poster scene where Glinda is whispering into Elphaba's ear. That, of course, is an homage to the famous poster that I talked about already, where Cynthia Erivo had a little bit of pushback on. But they included that scene in there, which I thought was great. So that is the fun fact segment for you all today. But yeah, Wicked for Good. I really, really liked it. Fantastic way to end this Wicked story. Had a lot of fun watching it in the theater. With that, we'll head into the rankings. We'll talk about the popcorn scale. We'll have Blockbuster Showdown return, where we'll pit the first Wicked movie up against the sequel. And then we'll do Best in Show for who wins that award for Wicked for Good. So let's head over to the rankings. Okay, first up, we're going to go to the popcorn scale for Wicked for Good. Let me pull up my notes here so I do not screw this up. So Wicked for Good. Really love the set pieces, love the costume design, love the cast. Music was phenomenal. I'm going to give it 4 popcorn buckets on the scale. I think it could have been just a little bit better. If it was a little bit longer, I think I was surprised that this was a little shorter than it was. I think the first film was like 2 hours and 40 minutes. This one clocked in at about 2 hours and 10 minutes. I think towards the end they kind of rushed it a bit, but I still like the ending. But it didn't have that magical punch that the first movie did. Now I'm kind of stepping on Blockbuster Showdown, which let's head over there first. But I am giving it 4 popcorn buckets, which I considered 5, but I just couldn't quite get there with this one. Even though I do really, really like this movie, I just couldn't get past the 4 popcorn buckets for it. But let's head into Blockbuster Showdown and really break this down here. So, Wicked, the first Wicked movie, that's 5 popcorn buckets for me. Now I'll post that on social media because I didn't release that last year. So I'm going to say that right now. The first Wicked is 5 popcorn buckets for me. So pitting it up against Wicked for Good in the Blockbuster Showdown, it's going to win because I think that is the better of the two. Now, that doesn't take away from Wicked for Good. I think it's a great movie. I think it's a great sequel, a great conclusion to this story. But like I said, it just didn't pack that magical punch that the first Wicked movie had. Like when I watched that in the theater for the first time last year, it was just magical. That's the word that I can use. It's just pure magic and entertainment. And I was blown away by it. I had never seen the Broadway musical, never read the book. I knew the kind of basic story that they were talking about in this different adaptation of the story we all grew up with. But Wicked for Good just didn't have that same magical punch like the first movie. But like I said, it doesn't take anything away from it. I still think it's a great movie. great conclusion. It's just when you look at the two together, it's just it's lopsided. It's in favor of Wicked because I think that is the better movie. It's more entertaining. I like the musical numbers more in there. It's just it was just a bigger magical experience than I had with Wicked for Good. It hit on a different level for me, and that's why Wicked is the winner of the Blockbuster Showdown. I gave it 5 popcorn buckets. Wicked for Good, I gave 4, but still a really, really incredible movie. I had a lot of good time watching it in the theater, and I can't wait to watch these back to back on a double feature night and just watch it in one big swoop. It's going to be great. And then the last thing we need to do is crown the best in show. Our nominees for Wicked for Good are Cynthia Erivo as Elphaba, Aria Grande as Glinda, and then Jeff Goldblum as the Wizard of Oz. Your winner of Best in Show is Cynthia as Elphaba. She is the winner of Best in Show for Wicked for Good. She did a fantastic job as Elphaba. She brought in the big guns with the musical notes. I love the performance. I love the costume. It's just all around good for me. She did a fantastic job in here, so she is the winner for Best in Show for Wicked for Good. So that'll do it for today's episode. Like I said, Fridays, we are doing Marvel Fridays. So this Friday, we will end phase 1 of the MCU with the Avengers movie. And then next Friday, we'll begin phase 2 with Iron Man 3, which I'm super excited about to do on the show finally. Avatar Fire and Ash is coming out next weekend. So we'll do a review episode on that when that comes out. And then we will... on Christmas Eve, I'll release an episode as well. I'll announce what movie I'm doing at the end of the Iron Man 3 episode next week. I want to kind of keep that a little bit of a secret, but I'm super excited to do one of my favorite Christmas movies of all time for the Christmas special on Cinematic Reviews. So some really fun content coming out, and then we'll cap off the year with the first annual Cinematic Awards, which I'll talk about a little bit more when we get closer to that, but I'm super excited to finally... it's a award show that I've been kind of creating the last year or so. So I'm very excited to have the first annual Cinematic Awards show on the podcast. So a lot of fun stuff coming your way. Also check out my football podcast every week, the End Zone Report. I'll have an episode come out tomorrow as we reflect on week 14 and look ahead to week 15. Fantasy playoffs are starting this week. So if you play fantasy football, you have a stressful couple weeks headed your way, but it's going to be fun at the same time. So with that, have an incredible week, everybody. We'll see you on Friday for the Avengers movie. Later, everyone.